It has been called the greatest automobile race in the world. The Indianapolis 500 is a race that tests both the cars and the drivers that compete ferociously on the final weekend of May every year. This is a race that has evolved steadily over the decades, from the profoundly primitive of yesterday to the techno-performance of today. The Indianapolis 500 of today is vastly different from the kind of event which began this long tradition back in 1911. Here is some rare footage of that first 500. It was a two-man operation in the cockpit of early Indy race cars. The driver was accompanied by a mechanic who didn't do much mechanicking. He basically held on for dear life. Safety was of minor concern in those days. Seatbelts were unheard of, which occasionally led to mishaps like this one. In the 1911 race, a mechanic fell from one of the race cars. Other cars swerved to avoid him and caused a near catastrophe. 4 cars out of the race, but no fatalities. Ray Harun and a Marmon Wasp won that first race, averaging just under 75 miles per hour. In this promotional film produced by Firestone some years after that first 500, Ray Harun and at the time Speedway president and 3-time Indy winner Wilbur Shaw talked about what might have given Harun the winning edge.
We designed this car to carry one man. I figured I could save weight and get more speed by riding alone. The job of the mechanic in those days was to watch behind and notify the driver when other cars were trying to pass. They claimed that it'd be dangerous for me to ride alone, so I rigged up this little gadget.
This, Mr. Reed, is the first rear vision mirror.
There were no Indianapolis 500 races during World War I, and in 1919, when it resumed, it was called that year the Liberty Sweepstakes. The Indy 500 was evolving again as specially built multi-cylinder racing engines debuted, some of them from overseas, from manufacturers like Fiat and Mercedes. In 1920, tire technology allowed the race to be won for the first time by a car that didn't swap tires during the entire 500 miles. Driver safety, still an unknown quantity, as roll bars, driving suits, and approved helmets were still years in the future. By the middle 20s, speeds had evolved upwards, and in 1925, Pete DiPaolo won the race, for the first time averaging over 100 miles per hour for the 500 miles. It was also the first year that cars ran on low-pressure balloon tires rather than the ultra-rigid high-pressure tires used in the past. These low-pressure tires soon found their way to passenger cars, greatly improving their ride quality, which up until then left much to be desired. In the 40s, after World War II, popularity of the Indy 500 grew tremendously, mainly because America was now a country that was clearly on its wheels. We almost lived in our cars. Compared to the race of 1911, with only several thousand curious thrill seekers, crowds of over 100,000 were now making the annual pilgrimage to what was now an internationally known event. It was during the 40s that certain Indy 500 drivers were becoming household names. Vukovich, Bettenhausen, Ruttman, Agabasian were all men whose greatest claim to racing fame was their stellar performances at the Brickyard. And even the track itself has changed in appearance and character over the years, from dirt to brick to asphalt. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has always challenged competitors to reach and sometimes exceed their own limits. In earlier years at Indy, even race car preparation was a less complicated task. Mechanics sometimes filled tires as you would at the corner gas station, and the pits themselves were a bit more oblivious to safety. As you can see in this 1946 race footage, there was no retaining wall between the racetrack and pit road. Hard to imagine compared with the level of safety adhered to today. Ultralight, monocoque, carbon fiber bodywork. Rear engine design with multi-valve turbocharged aluminum alloy power plants, ground effect spoilers, and tires over a foot wide. Speeds which necessitate a lap velocity over 200 miles per hour just to qualify. and over 200,000 devoted racing fans squeezed around a 2.5-mile oval. And the drivers who in some cases are barely older than voting age. That's the Indianapolis 500 of today, where fire suits, fully enclosed helmets, and high-tech fire protection are just some of the things that have replaced the dauntless, primitive, almost irreverent way men raced at Indianapolis in those oh-so-early days.